She called them the members she will be with until death. 10 years. One of the biggest girl groups in music history. And the moment that was supposed to be their greatest celebration quietly fell apart. When Lisa finally put her feelings into words, not once, but twice, the K-pop world stopped. Because what she wrote wasn't just an apology. It wasn't just gratitude. It was something far more revealing. It was the truth about what it actually felt like to be inside BLACKPINK on the most important night of their decade. And that truth is more complicated and more beautiful than anyone expected. To understand what Lisa's words meant, you first need to understand the weight of the moment they were written in. August 8th, 2016. 4 young women, Jisoo, Jennie, Rose, and Lisa, walked out under the BLACKPINK banner for the very first time. None of them could have known what was coming. Not the sold-out stadiums, not the world records, not the day when their name would be spoken in the same breath as the biggest acts in global music history. 10 years is a long time in any industry. In K-pop, it is a lifetime. BLACKPINK didn't just survive a decade. They fundamentally changed what was possible for K-pop artists on the world stage. They headlined Coachella. They collaborated with artists across every genre. They each built solo careers of their own, pushing their individual identities further than anyone thought YG Entertainment would allow. And through all of it, the controversy, the long hiatuses, the questions about the group's future, the departures from YG, Blinks held on. They waited. They cheered. They kept streaming and showing up year after year because they believed in something that 4 women on a stage had made them feel. So when August 8th, 2026 arrived, the official 10th anniversary of BLACKPINK's debut, the expectation wasn't just high. For millions of fans around the world, it felt almost sacred. They wanted a moment worthy of 10 years. What they got was not that. At least, not at first. And the disconnect between what fans hoped for and what actually happened set off a chain of events that nobody, not YG Entertainment, not the members themselves, anticipated. But here is the thing about that chain of events. At the very end of it, Lisa sat down and wrote something. And what she chose to say, on the anniversary itself, and then again nearly a week later, is what this video is really about. Because those 2 messages, taken together, tell a story that no press release ever could. Rising tension. Let's go back to the days leading up to August 8th. For weeks, Blinks had been watching the calendar. The 10th anniversary was the kind of milestone that only comes once. Fans had spent months speculating. Would there be a new group project? A concert? A documentary? Something that would honor everything the 4 of them had built together? Instead, on August 6th, just 2 days before the anniversary, YG Entertainment made an announcement. There would be a meet-greet event held at the National Museum of Korea in Seoul's Yongsan district. 2 days' notice. For one of the biggest K-pop groups in history, that timeline was jarring. And it got more complicated almost immediately. The initial announcement from YG stated that only members who were available around their individual schedules would attend. That single phrase sent shockwaves through the fandom. It raised an obvious and painful question. Would all 4 members even be there? For a fandom that had spent years navigating uncertainty about the group's future, watching each member pursue solo careers, watching contracts expire and reform, the idea that the 10th anniversary event might not even feature the full group was genuinely distressing. Then the details of the event itself began to emerge, and the concern deepened. The meet-greet would host 40 fans. 30. There would be a short, Waveverse livestream for fans watching at home. The celebration of a decade together would unfold in roughly 30 minutes, with a live stream that lasted barely 10. Now, in fairness, any event that brings all 4 members of BLACKPINK into the same room, in person, at this point in their careers, is genuinely meaningful. The logistics of reuniting 4 globally active solo artists are not simple, and the National Museum of Korea is a setting of real cultural significance. But logistics and cultural significance don't change what Blinks were feeling as the timeline took shape. This was supposed to be a celebration, a thank you for 10 years of loyalty, and for millions of fans who had no chance of attending, who had followed BLACKPINK from the very first day. The scale of the event felt like a mismatch, not with the love the members had for them, but with the systems around the group that shaped what this milestone looked like. The frustration wasn't quiet. Social media lit up. Hashtags trended. Fans from Seoul to Los Angeles, from London to Bangkok, voiced their disappointment with a clarity that was impossible to ignore. And then August 8th arrived. Despite everything, despite the short notice, despite the initial uncertainty about attendance, all 4 members showed up. Jisoo, Jennie, Rose, and Lisa stood together at the National Museum of Korea and looked out at 40 fans who had been lucky enough to be there. During the live stream, the members acknowledged that something had gone wrong in the planning process. In a moment that was clearly unscripted, they addressed the backlash directly. "It seems there were issues with communication," they said. "We sincerely apologize." For a few hours, it seemed like the moment had passed, that the emotions of the day might settle into something warmer. The photos that emerged from the event were genuine. You could see it in their faces, the four of them, together, marking something real. But then Jisoo sat down and wrote to her fans. And her words made clear that the emotional weight of the day hadn't faded at all. She admitted, quietly and directly, that the 10th anniversary was a day when she felt especially sorry, that her heart was heavy. That was just the beginning of a week of messages that no one fully predicted. But none of them carried the same weight as what Lisa wrote, in two separate moments that would stop the fandom in its tracks. The emotional revelation. On the morning of August 8th, before the event had even happened, Lisa posted on Instagram. In English, her chosen language for speaking directly to a global audience, she addressed Blinks with a depth of feeling that cut through the noise of the controversy entirely. She wrote that she was truly, profoundly grateful for every fan who had been with her over the past decade. She said that their support had been the force that kept her moving forward, that when she looked back at the hardest moments, it was the fandom's belief in her that made the difference. And then she made a promise. She told them she would keep working to become someone they could be proud of. But it was what she said about her members that became the line that traveled furthest. "My members whom I will be with until death," she wrote. Read that again. Not my bandmates. Not the members of BLACKPINK. She used a word loaded with permanence, with choice, with the kind of love that doesn't dissolve when a contract ends or a management structure changes. She acknowledged that the journey had been, in her words, quite a roller coaster. She didn't dress that up or minimize it. She wasn't pretending the decade had been smooth or uncomplicated. She was saying something more honest than that. She was saying that even with all the turbulence, she would not trade any of it. "I believe there is no better way than this," she wrote. And then, looking forward rather than backward, there will be ups and downs ahead, but we will stay together. For a fandom that had spent years worrying about whether BLACKPINK could survive as a unit through all the change, through solo careers and label departures, and long stretches of silence, those words landed like a hand placed on a shoulder. Like someone saying, "I know you were scared. Here is the truth." But the story doesn't end there. Because 6 days later, after Jisoo had written her apology, after Rose had taken time to find the words she felt were right, Rose later explained that she had delayed because she wanted to truly understand what fans had gone through, not just respond quickly. Lisa wrote again. This time, through the Bubble fan communication platform, she addressed the controversy head-on. She opened warmly, asking fans if they were staying cool in the summer heat. And then, with no preamble, she said what she had been sitting with for nearly a week. She named what was happening online. She said it made her sad. And she did not reach for excuses or explanations. "I'm truly sorry about how things turned out," she wrote. She said she could not even imagine how hurt Blinks must have felt, because she felt it too. The anniversary was supposed to be a special moment, a time of celebration for everyone. And the fact that it had caused pain instead of joy weighed on her. Then she said something that reoriented the entire conversation. "I'm not here to justify anything or make a point." Think about that phrasing. She wasn't deflecting. She wasn't defending the event's logistics. She wasn't pointing fingers at anyone else in the process. She was simply standing in the emotion of the moment, sitting with the disappointment that fans felt, and the disappointment she felt herself. What she wanted, she said, was to honor the love and the connection that had been built across 10 years. She closed by expressing genuine gratitude that they had been able to come together at all, and by saying she hoped they could all carry that love forward. Together. That word has always mattered enormously in BLACKPINK's story. But in the context of this anniversary, with all its complications, all its imperfections, it took on a particular weight. Lisa wasn't asking fans to forget their disappointment. She wasn't asking them to pretend the celebration was everything it could have been. She was asking for something harder and more durable than that. She was asking them to carry what was real forward and leave behind what hurt. And the real meaning behind those words? That's what we need to talk about. Analysis and deeper meaning. Two messages, written 6 days apart, each one different in tone, in context, in what it was responding to. But read together, they form something coherent, Something that tells you a great deal about where Lisa stands, personally, artistically, and in relation to the group that shaped her entire adult life. Start with the anniversary Instagram post. The phrase, "members I will be with until death," did not happen by accident. Lisa is not a performer who chooses words carelessly. Not in a public statement, and certainly not on a day as significant as this one. That declaration was intentional. It was offered freely, without being prompted by a controversy or a question from a journalist. It was simply what she felt and chose to say. What does that tell us? It tells us that whatever professional or structural separation may have occurred between the members and their original label, the human bond between these four women has not followed that same path. They are not just colleagues connected by a shared brand. They are something older and more stubborn than that. And that matters, because the K-pop industry does not make it easy for bonds like that to survive. Groups are managed tightly. Members are often kept to individual schedules. As global solo careers take shape, the time and space for friendship can become genuinely scarce. The fact that Lisa chose the language she chose, not diplomatic, not corporate, but personal and permanent, says something meaningful about what BLACKPINK is to her at this stage of her life. Now consider the bubble message. What stands out from an analytical perspective is what Lisa chose not to do. She did not explain the event's organizational challenges. She did not redirect blame toward management, even though the frustration among fans was largely directed at the structural decisions that surrounded the celebration. The short notice, the limited scale. She absorbed the emotion of the situation personally, even when the source of that emotion was arguably not her fault. That choice, to stand in accountability rather than explanation, is a form of emotional leadership. It is also, for a global idol who has spent years navigating enormous public pressure, a sign of significant maturity. Industry observers who study the relationship between K-pop artists and their fandoms will recognize this dynamic. When something goes wrong at the structural level, the members are often the ones who bear the emotional burden with their fans directly. That is a complex position to be in. And the grace with which all three members who addressed the controversy, Jisoo, Rose, and Lisa, handled that position says something about who they have become over a decade in public life. There is also something worth noting about the timing and sequencing of these messages. Jisoo spoke first, on the day itself. Rose delayed, explaining that she needed time to genuinely understand what fans felt. Lisa posted her apology after both of them, and addressed the situation with a quietness, a lack of performative emotion that felt very much like her own voice. 3 different approaches, 3 different timelines, all of them, in their own way, reaching toward the same place. And Jennie, who posted photographs and gratitude but did not address the controversy directly, that choice too is hers to make. Different members process differently. Different members communicate differently. That has always been true of BLACKPINK, and it always will be. What all 4 of them share, if the evidence of this past week is any guide, is a genuine care for the people who have followed them for a decade. The anniversary event may not have been everything it could have been, but the messages that followed it, those were exactly what they needed to be. Real, imperfect, human. Audience emotional mirror. If you have been a Blink for any significant length of time, you will know what this week felt like from the inside. You will know what it is to have waited. Not just for this anniversary, but for all the anniversaries that led up to it. The years when the group went quiet, and you kept the faith anyway. The years when solo projects dominated, and you celebrated each member's individual growth, while quietly hoping the group would find its way back to something shared. And you will know the specific ache of a milestone that doesn't quite land the way you imagined it would. That feeling is real. It is not petty or ungrateful. It is the natural result of caring deeply about something over a very long period of time. But here is what is also true. In the middle of a week that could have felt entirely like disappointment, Lisa sat down and called Jisoo, Jennie, and Rose the people she will be with until death. She said that the road had been a roller coaster, and she still wouldn't change it. Those words were not for the cameras. There were no cameras. There was no stage, no choreography, no stylist. It was just Lisa, and her feelings, and the people she chose to share them with. And then, 6 days later, she came back. She didn't have to. The controversy had already begun to settle. But she came back anyway, because she wanted fans to know that she had felt the weight of the moment too. That is not nothing. That is, in fact, exactly the thing that makes a decade of devotion feel worthwhile. The celebration may have been smaller than it should have been, but the love behind it, the love that Lisa put into words, both on August 8th and again on August 14th, that was exactly the right size. So tell me, what do you think this moment meant for Lisa and for BLACKPINK? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I want to read every single one. 10 years is a long time to hold on to something. BLACKPINK's 10th anniversary was not a perfect event. The members themselves said so. But in the days that followed, 4 women found ways to speak honestly, to their fans, and perhaps to themselves, about what those 10 years actually meant. Lisa's messages were not polished press statements. They were the kind of words that only come when something is deeply, genuinely felt. And that, maybe, is the most fitting tribute to a decade of BLACKPINK that anyone could have offered. Coming up next, what the solo careers of all 4 members could mean for BLACKPINK's future as a group. You will not want to miss it.